Is copywriting oversaturated? When people ask this question, what they're really asking is, do I stand a chance? How hard is it going to be for me to stand out? Is it actually possible for me to not only make a lot of money doing this, but make any money doing this? And so, one of the things that I try to do with Copy That and this secondary channel is sort of just break down in a more realistic and nuanced and non-bullshitty way what the actual realities of this business is, without the sort of like hype and flair and open loops and shit like that. Here's a truth about any creative profession, any sort of profession that has what we could call a hierarchy of skills. You have effectively a triangle of people. Down here at the widest part, you have newbies. That is people who are interested in copywriting, who have heard about this copywriting thing. But this is true for pretty much anything. This is true for the film industry. This is true for novel writing and for short story writing. This is true for people that are interested in becoming, I don't know, a interpretive dancer or something like that. And here's the thing. This is a self-replenishing demographic, a self-replenishing market. And that's true for any creative profession. This isn't like arc welding where, you could be the best arc welder in the world, but that's not going to make you famous, and it's not going to move your wealth much higher above the average of an arc welder. In creative fields, however, there's a clear distinction between somebody who has like competence versus somebody who's like exceptionally skilled and has been given a ton of resources and is able to like generate a lot of money. We have in this lower tier just people. They get excited and they enter this bottom of the pyramid, and there's just people coming in all the time, and it's people that are looking for like how to make money online. This is people who studied writing in school or who are always interested in like getting paid to write, and then like maybe read a blog post about this cool thing called copywriting and then start searching more and more for resources about it. Anyway, they enter into this sort of pool at the bottom. As you can tell, again, this is the widest, most, how should I say, packed pool. This is where most of the people are. And most people never get to a point where they are a junior. So a junior copywriter is somebody who's actually getting paid, somebody who is actually doing the work and getting paid for it. Most copywriters are juniors. And depending upon the type of field, like for example, if you are working at an agency, typically juniors are asked to, assist senior copywriters with projects. Junior copywriters will be paired with people that are more experienced so that they get the sort of impact of effectively like an apprenticeship sort of situation. In my world, in financial direct response publishing, juniors are often tasked to like write like order forms or offer sections or like lift copy so that senior writers, who can't be bothered with that stuff, just get to write the fun stuff and then move on and leave the boring stuff for the juniors. The stuff that is very templated, stuff that's very like, at some point that AI is going to start writing. And that's actually going to be a pretty major problem that, AI is going to be the most competitive with juniors. 80%, I would say, of copywriting work could probably be done by a junior with like C-level skills. And the reason for that is because a junior with AI is going to be able to produce B- to B level copy. Not much better. And here's the other problem. AI, like study after study, has started to show that people who rely on AI start to lose their critical thinking abilities. And if you lose your critical thinking abilities, especially in a creative field like copywriting, you lose the ability to move up to this next level of skill. This is going to be a major hurdle for a lot of people that are entering into the copywriting world. This is definitely oversaturated. At this intermediate level, there are just not very many people. These are just your sort of like run-of-the-mill working copywriters. Typically, like at the agency level, an intermediate copywriter is somebody who's just like a grunt doing the work, writing 900 Facebook ad scripts per month, They're doing pretty well, but they're not having any home runs. They're not having any sort of breakout hits. They write to the brief. They show up to work. They sit in their cubicle. They think a lot. They, take psilocybin mushrooms every now and again. They're happy or they're miserable. It goes either way. The problem with a lot of intermediate copywriters, the reason why a lot of these people do not ascend is because once you start getting into the senior copywriting role, you're doing a lot less copywriting and you're doing a lot more like ideation and supervision and management. And a lot of people at this level just don't want to do that, especially at the agency level. And you sort of have to politic a little bit. Indirect response, like this ascension from junior to intermediate to senior, like is more merit based. Like it's based pretty much on your sales and the results of the copy that you put out into the world. As you can see, there's just not a lot of people that make it to this senior level. And the reason why is because once people get to this intermediate level where they're like kind of content, most people don't move up to this level. They just kind of coast. And I know a lot of copywriters who just coast. There's another reason for that lack of ascension that I'll get into in just a minute. But yeah, once you get into the senior copywriting roles, like there's way more of an expectation that you're going to be mostly reviewing other people's copy and like trying to train, juniors and newbies and intermediates and stuff like that. Here you are operating more at the level of like a business executive almost, or like a creative director. Like you have to have one foot in your copywriting, but the other foot is going to be pretty solidly in things that are going to build businesses, partnerships, things like that. I've met very few senior copywriters who don't also do some form of either business consulting or who don't occupy some sort of like executive role or who don't do like client management or acquisition or things like that. And then up here, we have what we could call like, I don't know, the guru role. We'll just draw a little asterisk there. And that's people who sort of like, ascend to the top and become people who, how should I say, write or create the things that influence other people. And I'm not talking about like YouTubers, like people who are just like recapitulating information, but people who actually like have had this experience and have novel, unique insights and ideas to share with other people. You have to understand that one of two things have happened to help a senior get to this level. One of the things is that they are just tired of doing the work. One thing you got to understand is that once you are an intermediate copywriter, once you're a senior copywriter, like it's almost like being a professional athlete. By the time you're 40 or 45, like your knees hurt, like your shoulders hurt. You don't want to train to get better. You don't want to put in the time and the effort and the work to get better because like, oh my God, like there's just so much else that you need to do. You have to be operating at such a high level for such a long time. And dude, that wears on you. It wears on your body. It wears on your psyche. It wears on your relationships. Trust me, it wears on your relationships. And so the thing that you sort of encounter and experience is that a lot of seniors never ascend to this guru level because, very simply, they just sort of, again, they just stop. They just coast. A lot of gurus, what happens is it's a senior copywriter who learned a lot of things or had some novel insights and like have some cool things to say and share with people. And they just don't want to do this anymore. Other people who get to this level, and I don't want to name names, but there are a few famous people who wrote a lot of famous books about copywriting. And what happened was they figured out a very specific system or a very specific thing, and then it just stopped working for them. But they had developed these processes and had developed these systems for like, again, teaching their intermediates and teaching their juniors. And so what they do is they just assemble that into like a seminar or a workshop, and then they publish it as a book. Like, this is what you do. And then all these newbies discover what this guru was saying. And then they're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to use that system. And they realize that that system doesn't work anymore. And there's probably a reason for that. Or it works, but it doesn't work nearly as well as it did in like 2011. And so they struggle to, get to that junior level, or they get to that junior level using that old system and find themselves having to unlearn what they have learned to adapt to the creative field that has evolved. And that's always going to happen. Like in any creative field, tastes are going to change. What's marketable is going to change. the zeitgeist and demographics are going to change. And the only people who are able to like ascend this are people who are either at the cusp of that change, like they're changing along with it, and so they're able to grow, or people who are insightful enough to be able to like make those leaps themselves through a careful study and working analysis of what's going on. So that's the answer to is copywriting oversaturated question. Like it's complicated, but what we see is this bottom tier is oversaturated for a few different reasons. Again, there's the influx, there's the fact that like AI is going to make some junior roles redundant because, again, you don't need 3 people to write your advertorial when you could probably just have one junior with AI and some supervision do the same thing. So that's going to be a pretty major change that's going to cause a shrinkage in this world. And I have a whole YouTube short on the main channel about what kind of copywriting jobs I think are going to be most affected by the implementation of AI in these workflows. Again, what are we asking here? Is copywriting oversaturated is actually more of a like, do I still have a shot? If you've gotten this far, I want to take you a little bit further because there's something else that you got to understand. There are multiple levels to like what it takes to actually ascend up this pyramid. And I like using the analogy of a table because a table is like tangible and most people don't have a sort of, how should I say, like emotional baggage that comes along with tables. They just look at tables, but like tables is a business. Tables involves creativity. Tables involves, you can have a premium tables, you can have scalable tables, you can have mass manufactured tables, AI generated tables, whatever. When people are first learning this, they don't realize that there are multiple levels to this. So at level 1, when people are learning how to make a table or write copy, most people don't know how to make a table and they don't even try to get better. The vast majority of people at this bottom of the pyramid, the newbies, they're at level 1. And so they see the table, but seeing a table and using a table, you go like, tables, it's easy. It's 4 pieces of wood with a piece of wood on top of it. Making a table is easy. But then you go to make a table, or maybe you make a table with like a simple drawer in the middle of it. And then you realize very quickly that making a table is actually very difficult. And it requires special tools and it requires special skills. It requires special learning. Sometimes it requires apprenticeship, depending on the kind of table that you're going to make. So, it requires education and time and practice. Most people, when they are entering into this bottom of the pyramid, do not realize the sort of level 1 reality of like how to make a table, but they have that sort of Dunning-Kruger effect going on where they're just like tables, copywriting. It's just simple words, right? It's just simple words. They don't see that there's actually difficulty, like a sort of membrane of difficulty that's there. It's not an insurmountable difficulty. It's just a difficulty. It's any skill, any creative field. It's just learning the basics, the tropes, the things that you need, but also more importantly, the things that you need that will get you better over time. The problem is most people don't even try or want to put in the work. And that is, again, why people get stuck at one of these rungs. Level 2 is a harsher reality that a lot of people have trouble with, especially at the junior level, is that just because you know how to make a table, that doesn't mean that the table is any good. And here we get into more subjective things where it's just, you're like, Sean, but like copy, I wrote the copy. It has all the doodads and all the sales stuff. And yeah, with the stuff. Just because you can write a piece of copy, that doesn't mean that the copy is any good. But you're also just like, well, then what defines good copy? And I would just respond to you, well, what defines a good table? Somebody who's more utilitarian would say, well, it has 4 legs and a plank of wood on top and it holds my bowl of cereal. If you're trying to munch on your Cocoa Puffs, like that's good enough. But for somebody who's like trying to do interior designing or like build out a room or something like that, like that is certainly not enough. A table has to have certain looks. If you're trying to like build an office, a table has to have certain functionalities. If you are trying to like match curtains and stuff like that, a table has to have certain colors and certain shapes and certain designs. Like there's so much that goes into like what makes a table good, and it's usually subjective and contextual. And one of the problems that you're going to have as a newbie is sort of like understanding, sort of aligning your own like inner sensibilities of what makes a good table with what's actually not only seen as a good table in the market or in a particular demographic and a subsection of the market, and then also what your clients view as a good table. So like that's three things that need to align just at this like second level. And the problem is that most people, they go looking for objective answers. What makes a good piece of copy? And there isn't that. And it's always changing. It's always shifting, that subjective sense of what makes a good piece of copy. And not only is it always changing, but if you go from client to client to client or business to business to business, what defines good copy and what the goals of good copy are, it's going to differ. It's going to change. And that's really overwhelming to a lot of the people that are trying to ascend from this newbie or junior level. But it goes even deeper, because at level 3, you have to realize something. Just because you can make a table and just because you can make a good table, that does not mean that anybody is going to want to buy it. And if you go to any furniture store, you are going to see just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of unsold tables. Almost every single table is for sale. Are you going to buy it? No. Why not? And then once you start asking yourselves those questions, you're going to start understanding like, oh shit, the things that I write in terms of copywriting, just because it hit all the criteria of what makes a quote unquote good piece of copy, just because they do all the things of copy, that doesn't mean that the market's going to buy it. For the same reason that you would not go and buy an antique table at an antique store. You're going to have your own reasons, just like the market is going to have their own reasons for not buying your copy. At level 3, one of the things that you have to sort of figure out and contend with is, just because you have the skill, the sort of base level skill, and you know how to get better on your own, you've learned how to learn. And just because you've learned how to align your sense of what makes a good table with the market sense of a good table and your client sense of a good table, even if all that stuff aligns, that doesn't mean that somebody's going to buy it. And that is going to be a huge limit on people's ability to ascend past this intermediate stage. I sort of mentioned before that I know a lot of intermediate copywriters who've just like gotten good enough, but then they just coast because their copy is never anything special. It's good enough. And like it sells, but they've never had a home run. And this is a harsh reality. This is especially harsh for people in creative fields like film, where like, say you are a brilliant director, say you're a brilliant script writer, and, everybody tells you, oh my God, this is so good. This is so funny, yada, yada, yada. And you are just like pounding your head at level 3 going like, when am I going to get my big break? It's here that you can sort of like see enemies start to become manifest, like, oh, it's the studios, oh, it's the system, oh, it's this person who's responsible for my failures, when in reality it's just you're selling to a market, and the market is going to buy what it wants to buy. And you have two choices there. You can either like change what you were trying to sell or change the way that you're trying to sell it. That's it. And that's true for copy as well. You either change the way you write copy, or you change the niche that you're working in, or the approach that you're taking, or something like that. It's very few people who get to level 4, but they have their own sort of problems. And that is just because you can sell a table well, that doesn't mean you can do it at scale or at a premium. What do I mean by at scale? That means like very often and to a lot of people. A lot of people, once they get into that senior copywriter role, they are limited by the fact that they are just one person. And even if you have like an army of intermediate and junior copywriters like below you, there's a very simple fact that if you have one client who is going to give you a $10,000 to $20,000 retainer, they are going to ask a lot of you. You need to provide a lot to clients that are willing to pay that much. And I don't just mean actual deliverables and work and stuff like that. I mean like actual thinking and effort and skull sweat, all the above. And even if you have an army of people working for you, to make that work at scale to where you can have not just one happy client, but several happy clients, you need to figure out like all sorts of things outside of copywriting, how to processize your system, how to teach people, how to educate people, how to hire people, how to manage a business. This is one of the reasons why I actually discourage people from like trying to start an agency too quickly, because like if you're trying to learn copywriting, you're already trying to learn several difficult skills. If you were trying to start an agency as a copywriter, you are trying to learn not only several difficult skills, but also learn all these other business management and nuanced kinds of things. It's very challenging, especially if you are hungry for money. So that's what I mean by at scale. Even if you have an army of people working for you, it is difficult to do things beyond a certain point. And what typically happens for most businesses is that they go through a period of like exponential growth that then tapers off. And most people that you see on YouTube talking about like, oh, I got this client, now I have 6 clients, and now like I'm making all this money and I'm making $12,000 a month and stuff like that. They are in this point of the curve, and they do not realize that at a certain point, like reality is going to kick in, and you are going to have to put in more and more effort to get fewer and fewer results. And that's a challenge that most people really, really struggle with. The alternative to that is to sell at a premium. You know, you ditch $3,000 clients for one $10,000 client. And that $10,000 client, you know, theoretically you have less work, but the caliber of the work that is required of you and the results that you need to deliver are that much higher. And like I said before, people stuck at this intermediate stage, they have trouble just like figuring out what it is that's going to be the most valuable thing to a business. And so they have trouble operating in such a way that they can sell their services at a premium, that they can sell their copy for higher and higher prices. And at a certain point, very, very few people are going to be able to do this. Few people are going to be able to do this. And so, you know, there's going to be just a great filtering at each one of these levels of people just sort of like unable to get past or unable to figure out the next level. One of the reasons why the newbie junior levels, that's why it's so oversaturated. That's why the market can't tolerate all the people that are in at that level. The market can't pay for everybody. Like, here's the thing. Businesses only have so much money. You are just like, oh, why won't people give me a chance? Like, oh, like I went and got my marketing degree from a university. Like, why can't I get hired? Or, oh, I just got laid off from my copywriting job after working there for 10 years. Why isn't anybody hiring? The reason why is because like you need not only skills that boost you up to this next level, you also need to understand that like at at level 3 and at level 2, just because you're good, that doesn't mean somebody's going to give you money. You have to sort of change your tack. Okay, this is all sort of hopeless, but there is actually some hope. And here's a very simple fact. I mentioned before at level 4, down here, that you can get, ditch 3 clients to work for one $10,000 client. Now, here's the thing. Most agencies, most like copywriters who can command a premium for their services, they are just, again, one person or a small team of people working with one business. But there are millions of businesses out there. And you, newbie, only need to find one and make a difference. If you can find one business to give you a shot and then start going through these ranks and figuring things out, you are going to make a ton of money. It only requires one, because again, this person, the big kahuna, the senior copywriter, if he's at this level, he's not going to want to work so much. He's not going to want to do absolutely everything. And more importantly, he's at a certain point going to get exhausted and look for an exit. Look for something that is going to allow him to scale, to basically do less and have more time, but still make more money. And so that's going to free you up, not only to work for individual businesses, but also to work for people like this that are looking to scale. So is there hope for juniors and newbies? Yes, because new businesses are being invented all of the time. not every intermediate is going to become a senior, but like seniors are going to be looking to scale all the time. So what you can do at this stage in your career, at the newbie stage in your career, is hunt for these smaller opportunities. And rather than go for like really big stuff early on, sell your services for very, very cheap or, at a discount, and build up that circle of cred so that you can justify either getting hired by more businesses or by people that you can actually learn a lot from so that you can get those premium clients and make that money. A lot of this just requires you to humble yourself a little bit, to understand that in this realm, there's going to be a lot of people just like you. And just because you are one of literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people at this stage, that doesn't mean you can't stand out. In fact, if you pay attention to the things that we're trying to say to you on this channel or other channels, most people really fail to stand out. They haven't figured out how to do it. And the reason why is because a lot of people at that level, they're at level 1. They don't realize that making a table requires skill, and they don't know how to get better. So as long as you keep learning, keep putting in effort, keep learning how to learn, copywriting is not going to be oversaturated for you. It'll be oversaturated for everybody else who's like trying the same 10 hacks and tactics that they learned on YouTube and stuff like that. And ultimately getting the results that they deserve.